I'm the teacher who married a second grader. I was already married, had 4 children, and fell in love with the 8-year-old student. Yes, you heard right. My case is hard to believe, but there is more. I also became pregnant by him twice. This criminal story is full of layers, and I will explain everything in detail here. I'm Mary Kay. I was 34 years old when it all happened, and I was a teacher in Seattle in the 90s. The victim, Willie Fulau, a 12-year-old boy when he became a father for the first time in 1997. To understand this case, I will tell you more about myself. I was born in 1962 in California. After finishing school, I entered Arizona State University, and there I met and became close to Steve Letourneau, who would later become my husband. During college, I became pregnant with Steve, and in 1985 we got married and moved to Alaska. We spent some time there, but soon we moved back to Seattle. We arrived in Seattle, and I started working as a teacher at a school in the city of Bering, which is a smaller town on the Seattle side. Both other teachers, other colleagues of mine, and the students themselves at the time described me as a good teacher. In 1991, it's when Willie Fulau enters this story, 8 years old at the time. I became his teacher. We began to become very close at that time. He really liked to draw, and I bought him art materials and even gave him some private lessons. But at the time, when he was in 2nd grade, it was just a relationship between teacher and student. We kept in touch over the years, and in 1995, he became my student again, this time in the 6th grade. At that moment, I was 34 years old and he was 12. This time, we started to get even closer. He also got close to my children and also to my eldest son, who was of a similar age as Willie. At the same time, my marriage with Steve was in crisis. We both had relationships outside of marriage. Willie, who was a 12-year-old child at the time, would have bet $20 with a cousin, saying that he would be able to sleep with his teacher. And this happened for the first time a few days before his 13th birthday. At that moment, I committed the first crime. And this went on over the next few months. I simply fell in love with him. At the beginning of 1997, the story begins to be discovered. My husband, going through my things at home, discovered little love letters that I had written to Willie. As soon as he discovered these letters at home, he told a relative, and that relative immediately called the school and reported everything. The school principal and the other teachers were obviously shocked when they discovered everything. They spoke to me and reported it to the police, and I was immediately arrested. And that's when the revelation comes that I was already pregnant at that moment, 6 months ago. This spread throughout the country. No one believed it was a real case due to the sheer size of the absurdity. And in May 1997, I gave birth to a girl. And 3 months later, I went in front of a judge to face criminal charges for what I had done. And in August 1997, I confessed everything in front of the judge, said he regretted it and that it would never happen again. But this story is going to get worse. I kind of said that in front of the judge just to try to lessen my sentence. I was sentenced at that trial to 7.5 years in prison, but the lawyers managed to win the right for me to be released on parole after 6 months in prison. That, of course, with some conditions, I had to undergo specific treatments, take some medications, and the main thing was not to get close to Willie at all. But guess what happened right after I was released? Days after serving those 6 months on February 3rd, 1998, less than a month after I left, I was caught with Willie in a car. I had a lot of baby clothes in the car, money, food, and documents. Everything indicated that we had planned to disappear. I was immediately arrested again, but the worst part of all was that I was already pregnant again with his second child. The judge then ordered me to serve my sentence in full, that first sentence of 7.5 years, and this time without the possibility of being released unconditionally. Our second daughter was born in prison in October 1998. And at the same time I was serving my sentence, Steve, my husband, filed for divorce and moved to Alaska with our other 4 children. The 2 daughters who were born were under the care of Willie's mother while I was in prison. Me and Willie continued to have contact clandestinely until I was released in August 2004. The judge had determined that the 2 would no longer have contact when I was released. Both of us went to court to overturn this decision, and we succeeded. In May 2005, when I was 43 years old and he was 21, we married and then we went to live together in Seattle. Even though Willie was already an adult, he seemed to not understand what he had suffered there at the time. He didn't like being placed as a victim in this situation, and I also said that I felt in love with him. In other words, I also seemed to not understand the crime I had committed. The marriage lasted until 2017 when he filed for divorce, and before that, in 2015, when we both gave an interview, he finally seemed to have understood a little of what he had suffered. He said he would never accept a relationship like that from one of his daughters. In 2020, I ended up becoming very ill, and Willie, who had already moved to California, returned to Seattle and stayed with me until I passed away in July 2020, at the age of 58. Willie also